Hi, everybody. Happy early Community Land Trust Day, or World Community Land Trust Day. It's coming upon us. My name is Ben Harris. I'm the Director of Communications for the International Center for Community Land Trusts, also known as the CLT Center. It's really exciting to be here today and to see all of you together in this virtual room. I'm going to kick things off by just reiterating how excited I am to have all of you to hear. This is a really special event on community land trusts and climate action. Um, Over the past few months, as we prepared for World CLT Day coming up this Friday, again, just a nice reminder, it felt important to create a space for dialogue on a topic that crosses borders and invites conversation among CLT practitioners and folks working in community-led development. And since climate change is something we're all navigating in every context and community, we figured why not start here? At their core, as you may know, CLTs are about stewardship and they operate with a long-term horizon in mind. That's why just transition work isn't a separate lane. It's embedded in everything that CLTs do, from housing to land use to building community resilience. Climate justice is central to the mission of the CLT movement, and by extension to the work we do every day at the CLT Center. And which, as a brief intro, for those who may not know, the CLT Center was founded in 2018 to support the worldwide movement of CLTs and similar strategies of community-led development on community-owned land. We're governed by a board of directors from 7 different countries, and we work as a library, preserving and sharing knowledge. We work as a bridge by connecting practitioners across borders, and we also operate as a think tank, sharing innovative practices and support collective land stewardship. We also publish books and monographs under our imprint, Terra Nostra Press. So, also, again, the third time's the charm. I mentioned at the beginning that today's event is part of World CLT Day this year. It's now in its 4th iteration, and World CLT Day is a global celebration of the power, creativity, and diversity of the CLT movement. It's about raising awareness, building solidarity, and frankly, celebrating all the hard work that people like yourselves are doing around the world. This session today is meant to be a conversation grounded in peer learning and storytelling, designed to highlight how CLTs are responding to climate challenges. From green building and energy retrofits to food sovereignty, post-disaster recovery, and resistance to land speculation, we know there's no single blueprint, but there are powerful lessons to share. And in a time of intensifying climate crises, we realize that it's urgent. It's more urgent than ever that we gather to learn from each other and chart a shared path forward. So today, whether you're here as a practitioner, a resident, an organizer, researcher, policymaker, you are part of this global story. Um, Today, just to kind of give you a layout of the land, we've got a big event, and over the next 70-ish minutes, this is going to be more or less what you should expect. So we're going to have this short framing presentation from Dr. Line Algoed, my colleague, whose work explores how collective land governance strengthens climate resilience and community sovereignty. Then we'll move into 2 rounds of breakout sessions facilitated by my wonderful colleagues. And when we get to those, I'll ask everyone to please introduce yourself. Well, actually, I'll do so now. Would you mind? I'm going to call on each of my facilitators, which are 5 of you right now, to introduce yourself with your name, organization, and where you're calling from. So first, I'm going to call on Geert.
Hi everyone, my name is Geert de Pauw and I work for Community Land Trust Brussels in Belgium.
Great. Thanks, Geert. Josie.
Hi everyone, I'm Josie. I work for the CLT Network for England and Wales, and I'm based down on the south coast of England.
Wonderful. Rylan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rylan Shoemaker from the European Community Land Trust Network, and I am calling from Brussels, Belgium.
Annabelle.
Hi everyone, I'm Annabelle Pigeon. I'm based in Scotland and I am a board member of the International Centre for Community Land Trusts.
Wonderful. And Morgan.
Hello, everyone. I am calling from Scotland as well, and I am calling from South of Scotland Community Housing.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So back to what to expect. So each of you are going to be placed into a randomly allocated breakout room with one of these lovely contestants, with one of these facilitators. And after each breakout session, we'll return to the main room for report backs that my co-host Lena is going to help me with. And then I'll obviously close with some final remarks, share some next steps for staying involved, and if, of course, you have any questions or anything, throughout the event, please feel free to let me know. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce my colleague, Lena, or shall I say, Dr. Line Algoed. Lena is a researcher and educator whose work in Barbuda and Puerto Rico sheds light on the role of communal land tenure in resisting displacement and confronting disaster capitalism. Her talk today is titled Dispossession, Vulnerabilization, and Disaster Capitalism, Fighting Back Through Communal Land Tenure. So, with that being said, Lena, the floor is yours.
I really feel that this event is very important, and it comes at a very important time as well, because we're facing so many unspeakable crises. And I really feel like it's very common for us to start to feel very overwhelmed, to start feeling unsure whether anything we do still makes any sense anymore, right? I think many of you share that feeling. I definitely have that feeling very much. But then I feel like when we do come together in events like these, and we find out about what everybody's doing, and and the very hopeful actions that people are taking everywhere, that communities, organized communities are taking everywhere, it might give us fuel to really keep going. And I think that's extremely important as a sort of community care to ourselves as well. And so today, I want to tell you a little bit about the inspiration that I really found in studying, as Ben said, the importance of communal land tenure in countering the consequences of climate change, right? And I studied this for my PhD, which I finished last year. And so my PhD was based on participatory action research. Basically, that means that I wanted to spend as much time as possible outside of academia and really closely collaborate with what some communities were already doing. And I focused my PhD on 2 communities that are living with communal land tenure in the Caribbean region. And so it really is about the Caño Martín Peña Community Land Trust, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. And that's a community land trust, one of the first of its kind, that was built in an informal settlement in a self-built neighborhood. But then also with the inhabitants of the very sparsely populated, small, rural Caribbean islands of Barbuda. The picture that you see here is Barbuda. And Barbuda has had communal land tenure for centuries. First of all, I really want to take a step back, because we really take it so for granted that land is something that can be bought, that land is something that we as individuals can own. And so that idea of private property of land, it's just become so much a part of how our world works. A lot of people say it's in our DNA, right? But actually, when you really look at the numbers, more than 50% of the world's surface is not privately owned, right? So private property is definitely the dominant way of organizing land, but it's not universal, right? So more than a half of the world's lands are held collectively, communally, by about 2.5 billion people. And so in these places, land is not for sale. Everything that comes with the land, water, plants, minerals, forests, stunning sea views, everything that comes with it is not for sale. But as this slide of land rights now says, only about 10% of that communal land is officially recognized by governments, for example. leaving about 1/3 of the world's population vulnerable to dispossession, to displacement by more powerful actors that can be governments, multinational companies, etc. So now I started my PhD on the 1st of September 2017. I had already been working with the Caño Martín Peña Community Land Trust since they won the World Habitat Award in 2015. Tomorrow we have a webinar about the importance of the World Habitat Award. And so my initial plan for my PhD was really to do research about the Caño CLT, right? How CLTs in an informal settlement can stop gentrification, right? But then on the 5th of September 2017, Hurricane Irma happened. It was one of the worst storms ever in the world, but also definitely in the Caribbean. And then a few weeks later, only a few weeks later, Hurricane Maria happened. This is the second picture here. And that really hit Puerto Rico like no other storm had done before. And so this hurricane really was a sort of turning point, let's say, in the Caribbean, not only because it was one of the worst ever, one of the deadliest ever, but also because it led to a stronger awareness of the connections between climate change and colonialism. And these islands, they were not prepared for such disasters. And a lot of that had to do, as scholars argued, with its historical, or in the case of Puerto Rico, present-day colonial situations. And so an important Caribbean scholar, Hilary Beckles, termed this the hurricane moment. And of course, we know that because of climate change, hurricanes will become much more frequent, much more severe, much quicker, right? And so I became, at that moment, that first month in my research, very interested in climate change and how climate change was worsening the threat of dispossessions, worsening the threat of displacements of people living with communal land. But also, and crucially, I was also becoming very interested in how communal lands are actually helping people to stand up against those dispossessions. Are they better protected against those dispossessions? As such, are communities better protected against the consequences of climate change? Why should we be talking about communal lands when we're addressing climate change? Because protecting communal land is so crucial in addressing our climate emergency. And a report from the Rights and Resources Initiative shows exactly how important communities that are living on communal land are for storing, for example, above ground carbon, right? When carbon is emitted, right, by industries, transport, agriculture, forests help to absorb this carbon and reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's what trees do, right? And so this report by Rights and Resources found that communal forest lands that were held communally by communities, store about 4 times the total global carbon emissions. Right? So it's extremely important to protect these forest communal lands because our Earth simply cannot survive without these lands. So let's take an even bigger step back in time this time. Many scholars are framing climate change as a contemporary manifestation of something that was started, or at least accelerated, about 500 years ago, right? With the colonial invasion, the European invasion of the Americas. And so that is really the destruction of the earth, the destruction of nature, of land, for the benefit of only a small group of people. And so the Martinican scholar Malcolm Ferdinand has called this colonial inhabitation. And so that small group of beneficiaries that are benefiting from the destruction of the planet is today as active as it has ever been. And we really see this happening more than ever now around the world, right? And that's also why I conducted my research from a theoretical framework of decolonial thought, right? Decolonial scholars examine the influence of colonialism on contemporary practices such as private property or climate change. I also conducted my research from a feminist perspective, because we see that colonialism, those colonial events also brought a shift from a more woman-centered, feminist view of land that is necessary for reproduction, land that is necessary for life itself, land that is necessary for survival. Colonialism brought a shift from that to a much more mechanistic idea of land as property, land as a resource, land as something to produce value, land as something to make money of, right? And the communities that I worked with have a very different notion of the importance of land. And I think most of the communities that have community land trusts also have that very different notion of land. Land is for community, land is for survival, land is for us, right? And we see communities, many of them led by a majority of women, stand up to defend these non-mechanistic ideas of relating to land. And so colonialism and colonial practices are not something of the past, right? We see it very much at play today with deadly land conflicts, unfortunately, around the world, but also not so natural disasters, right? Natural disasters are only so to a certain extent natural. Much of them, as Caribbean scholars have also said, are not so natural. And many of them are happening because of colonial practices. For example, wildfires, right? They can be directly traced to colonial practices of planting invasive trees that are extremely inflammable. And so here I'm sharing some slides from a land trust in the Tonga territory or Los Angeles. And they posted these slides on their social media just a few days after the devastating fires in Los Angeles in November last year. And so they're basically saying that indigenous practices like slash and burn, where certain parts of forests are burned, controlled by communities, they're actually beneficial to plant and animal life, but those practices were stopped and invasive trees were planted instead. And so land that gets neglected like that gets full of the driest type of bushes, and that is fuel for wildfires. The very same thing is happening as we speak, unfortunately, in Israel, right? Invasive trees that were planted to make the land look more like Europe, right? And also, of course, displaced Palestinians, they were on fire. And this happened, of course, under the guise of environmentalism. And I really think that these fires, these wildfires, and all those other not so natural disasters really are sending its inhabitants a very powerful message. So I'm wrapping up soon, but in what ways exactly then are communities who have this very different relationship to the land protected from climate change, right? And here I would like to show a very short 1-minute fragment of a documentary that myself and some colleagues produced on the island of Barbuda. And so Barbuda has had communal land tenure for centuries, only to now see it threatened after the hurricanes in 2017 with privatization, mostly through their prime minister, the prime minister of Antigua and Barbuda, who at the same time, as you will see, is asking the UN for loss and damage funding. So I hope that, all right. Can you hear the sound?
Mangrove wetlands are some of the most important and most efficient carbon sinks.
Codrington Lagoon is ook een beschermde Ramsar-site. De internationale Ramsar-conventie beschermt watergebieden over de hele wereld. Zulke gebieden worden beschouwd als een belangrijk onderdeel in de bescherming tegen de klimaatopwarming. Dit zijn beelden van Gaston Brown tijdens een VN-vergadering. Hij vraagt er compensatie voor de gevolgen van de klimaatcrisis.
The burden falls mostly on the poor in small developing nations, such as mine.
For years, we have had the solution and actually practicing it. And when you're now hearing of a development policy which is going to be taking out things like this, and then you're going to be lobbying in these climate meetings for loss and damage, how can you justify that when you are taking out the insurance policies that you have and the things that allow us to be able to withstand the climate change? This is what protects us.
Exactly.
And that's why it's so important to us and the world.
Exactly.
Okay? We need
Okay, so that was a very short video. As you will have seen, John Mussington, one of the community leaders there, really is adamant about protecting the communal lands, because it is through that communal land really that they are able to protect biodiversity, to protect the mangroves that actually are ecosystems that are protecting the community. So I think it's very important for us to listen to those voices, to include those voices, and to really listen to how basically they're building a whole different imaginary of land. And so I'm wrapping up. This is my very last slide, and I know that we have had some delays because of what happened just before. But I want to end this presentation with some of the conclusions that I drew from this research. In what ways are communities mobilizing their communal land tenure systems to counter climate change? Right? Why is communal land so important as climate action, right? And so from my interviews with community leaders, with residents, with staff, these are some of the conclusions that we drew, right? So communities that are living with communal land had a much stronger community organization at its base, which allowed communities, right, which allowed for community-led disaster preparation, which allowed for mutual aid during the disaster and for mutual recovery just after. And this happened, for example, through collective responses to policies that perpetuate their vulnerability, also through legal avenues to defend their community rights, as well as through the preservation of natural environments. And so ultimately, I think that these communities foreground, prioritize a radically different imaginary of what land is, right? Land is not just there for profit, but it really is necessary for survival of the human species when we're facing climate change. And I think this is not only true for the Caño Martín Peña Community Land Trust, but I think this is true for community land trusts around the world. Just a final note of thanks, giving the credit to the communities that I've worked with, because the ideas are there. Please do follow them on social media and support their cause. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Lena. Thank you for taking the time with this wonderful presentation. So my facilitators will be guiding you through this, asking you questions, and can't wait to hear back from you in about 15 minutes.
Welcome to our breakout group 4. Glad you've made it here okay, commuted okay. And we've got about 15 minutes together. And as Ben said, it would be really helpful if you're happy to share a brief introduction. So if I could invite us to just go one by one, and please share your name, the organization you're with or representing, and your location. So just to, you might have heard me earlier, but I'm Annabelle. I'm one of the board members at the centre and also associated with South of Scotland Community Housing here in Scotland. Is it okay if I go to you, Melinda, first, please?
Certainly. Thank you, and glad to be here. My name is Melinda Zeterik, pronounced she, her. I'm with the Muskoka Community Land Trust, and we are in Ontario, Canada. We're about 200 kilometers north of Toronto, for those who, to situate us geographically.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Melinda. And Rob, can I go to you next, please?
Yeah, so Rob Olshansky, let's see, I'm a urban planning researcher, officially retired, but associated with the University of Illinois and with UC Berkeley. I'm in Albany, California, and done for decades research on recovery after disasters. I look at issues of community relocation, and I've long been interested in all kinds of different ways of thinking about property and how that affects those situations. And I discovered the El Caño Martin Peña Land Trust very shortly after Hurricane Maria, well, it was in 2018 I did it. Anyway, it's exciting, but also disappointing. I think it's the most, really the most amazing example of the kinds of things I'm interested out there in the world. And there aren't too many others. So anyway, so I like the idea of this World Community Land Trust organization, and hopefully these can spread. Anyway.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for being here. It's good to hear that background. And I like the caveat of officially retired. Sounds like it's maybe not quite fully executed yet, but it's great to have both of your different perspectives. And Ivana, are you seeing and hearing us okay? Is it all right if I come to you next for a quick intro?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Ivana. I'm a climate justice organizer with Trust South LA. We're a community land trust based in South Los Angeles. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ivana. Yeah, thanks for being here as well. Really relevant
Ontario and
to
California.
the presentation we just heard. Yes, yeah, we are quite west and east coast all around. Okay, so our kind of topic for this breakout group, although we can be very flexible, because we have a small group here to kind of go with any other kind of key interests or things you'd like to share. But our first question was understanding what your organization is currently doing to address climate change. So this might include reference to what has inspired or motivated this work. Obviously with lots of overlap with what we just heard, but I'm sure plenty more to add there. The sorts of climate related work that you're doing. And also keen to hear if that is a part of a formal program or if it's more informal, if you are filling the gaps or, the lack of kind of public response to any of these issues. And also open to hearing, any kind of successes or things you are proud of in that work or things that might be coming down the line. So just quite broadly open it up to hear what you're currently doing to address climate change and your reflections on that.
I can start. Addressing climate change is central to our mission at the Muskoka Community Land Trust. It's certainly been a part of my own work for most of my career as well. And I'm one of the founders of the Land Trust. And I also have a background in construction and climate resilient construction. So we see that the climate threat and climate change is accelerating and exacerbating threats to our community from a perspective of the buildings that we're building, and our response to our housing crisis is to build, unfortunately, typically with materials that only exacerbate the building crisis, materials with high carbon and that aren't necessarily going to withstand our future climates. So we're building net zero, low embodied carbon energy, looking at what the real metrics of climate adaptation are that we need to consider and mitigation when we're approaching building. We're currently building new housing, but also looking at retrofits, and also considering like where we land, looking at climate as a lens. And the other piece of the big threat that climate change is exacerbating in our communities is the polarization and the disconnection of people and members of our community. So by addressing and focusing on building community, building participatory leadership and governance of our land and bringing the commons back into our our conversation, our vocabulary here, it's private property is sacrosanct. So the whole idea is a big focus for us, and building community connection, trust in institutions, trust in your neighbors, building those connections, and simultaneously with all of those lenses, we are treaty people and are looking to act with. We have a mission for acting in truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous communities and figuring out that path forward. And there's a land back movement, so we're working at how do we honor and respect and allow and step back and not get in the way of Indigenous leadership of what of land management should be in our community and support that, while also and continuing to meet our mission. So all of that for us is wrapped up in climate. And then we are fortunate our government has declared that housing is a human right, but we're in quite a we're in a moment globally and in our community. So yeah.
Can I just check on that? Sorry, the polarization and disconnection. Are you saying it is now harder to do this community involved work in response to the polarization of climate change, or the point that it is now more important?
I would say that the people who are promoting polarization and disconnection are seizing upon the impacts that climate change is having on our communities and using that as a leverage point and to divide people and to create more and inflame polarization. And so it's getting worse, and climate is a lever that those who would benefit from that or see that are using. And then also, if we are going to have climate adaptive and resilient and mitigating communities, having trust in each other and having that communication connection as communities is vital. And it is harder because of 40 plus years of neoliberalism and private property and getting away from that. So there's a lot of repair and healing work to be done across all of those things, but we see it as it's not more or less urgent than reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, or they're fundamental to the journey and the solution.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I see what you mean. Yes, the climate is being used as a wedge tool there.
Yeah.
Great. Yes. Okay.
And if we don't reverse neoliberalism and the disconnection and the individualization of people, we will never be in a position to, only as communities, only together is our framework that we can actually have climate justice.
Okay. Thanks, Melinda. Yeah. And then over to Ivana, if that's similar to your experience, or Rob, is that what you're hearing through your research from other trusts or community-led organizations? How do those themes fit with you?
Sorry. I guess I got stuck on like listening in. I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, no worries.
If you could please really
my answer
remind me.
didn't sound like that.
Of course.
Yeah, I was really
checked a
interested
lot
in
of
what she was
questions.
saying. Yeah.
That's a really nice compliment. I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
The question, but I would just invite your reaction response to how what Melinda was saying kind of fits with your experience. But we're wondering what your organization is currently doing to address climate change. So obviously in the wake of the fires, perhaps more specifically, what is your organization or the Coalition Community Land Trust in LA doing?
Thank you. So within Trust South LA, we do steward and own land within South Los Angeles. We own about 151 units, one being like a 140 unit building that's a partnership with another nonprofit called Abode Communities. We own the land, but the property management and Abode Communities is most owns the building and does the property management. And then we own a couple of duplexes and small homes within South LA, and some of the work that we do that's related to climate justice or climate action is more towards mobility justice. So as many of you know, like air pollution is like a, a huge thing within LA, and within South LA, a lot of our communities, our frontline communities, depend on public transit. And so we mostly, like, our climate work pretty much focuses on that, on trying to spread awareness or advocate for more clean mobility options. And so we've done a lot of work with outreach efforts to spread word about this project or programmed in Los Angeles called Blue LA. It's a EV car share service that's meant for all Angelinos, and so we were advocating to get stations implemented in South LA, because Blue LA is a pilot program, or was a pilot program. It actually sunsetted last month, unfortunately, and we were doing a lot of outreach and engagement to try to get stations in South LA. But other than that, we host an e-bike library program, which allows South LA residents with the option to rent an e-bike for free. So far, we're part of a coalition with other mobility justice program organizations who advocate for clean mobility in parts of South Los Angeles and throughout the city. And so we've been very engaged in that program and getting folks to like rent e-bikes and that kind of work. But we're also part of another collaborative called the South LA Eco Lab, which is a $35 million project that is funded through the Transformative Climate Communities program, granted through the Strategic Growth Council. And so we're part of the community engagement. We're the leads for the community engagement. So we do a lot of community engagement and advocacy towards like climate work. And so I guess this would be one of the examples. Through the South LA Eco Lab, we lead with the collaboration of other South LA organizations. We help lead canvassing campaigns that educate community residents about all the climate investments that are under the Eco Lab. And that includes anti-displacement, because as you know,
I think before we jump into it, it'd be good to just do a super quick, just like we did previously, just name where you're joining from, and then we can dive into the juicy stuff. Frank, would you like to say first?
Sure, just a quick intro.
Mhm.
Yeah, hi, Frank Wells. I'm president of Bright Community Trust. We're a housing and community development organization and CLT in Florida, USA.
Thanks, Frank. Hannah, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm calling from the southwest of England. I'm a board member of the European CLT network and previously worked for London Community Land Trust.
Thank you. Dali, would you like to go?
Hi everyone, I'm working at the Community Land Trust of Brussels.
Zach? Would you like to say your name, where you're joining from?
I'm not sure if you called on me.
I
Maybe
did,
you
yeah,
did.
sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm Zach. I'm in Minnesota in the United States with Two Rivers Community Land Trust outside of the Twin Cities Metro, which is Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Amazing, thank you. And Amy, finally, would you like to say your name, where you're joining from?
Yes, my name is Amy Pratt. I'm joining from USA, Delaware, Diamond State Community Land Trust.
Amazing. It's great to have so many of you joining us on this call. So I guess first up, the question to dive into is what kind of climate-related work is your CLT or other organization doing at the moment? Would anyone like to kick off?
I'm happy to dive on in. Hi, everybody. Again, Frank Wells in Florida, USA. Uh, but I'm actually speaking to you from Washington, D.C. I'm up here with the National Low Income Housing Coalition with a bunch of folks who work in disaster research and recovery, uh, comparing data and talking about sharing best practices. So I would say a lot of our work at Bright uh, revolves around disaster recovery in the aftermath of hurricanes, um, both connecting resources directly and then also we do things like work with cities and counties to understand what kinds of households are affected by disasters and particularly who's getting left out, who needs to be able to access resources. So our biggest nexus with climate change is really the effects we experience in terms of hurricanes and disasters. But then, as I put in the chat after Ben's survey, that also winds up for us increasing insurance costs, which has become an increasing driver of overall housing costs. And it's affecting both some of our current CLT homeowners who are getting unexpectedly large insurance bills, and also we're seeing it make it too expensive for some households to even purchase even within the CLT because of how expensive insurance is in some cases.
Wow, that's really tricky. Is anyone else, or Hannah, would you like to speak?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm doing a bit of freelance work for a CLT in the city of Bristol at the moment, and they're called We Can Make. And they focus on sort of carbon neutral methods of building and sequestering carbon in the build. So they're focusing on local modes of construction from locally sourced timber and sort of modular homes that can be created by the residents on-site factories. So you shift kind of the creation of the build from these larger factories into smaller community factories. And yeah, basically every step is looking at sustainability and localization. So that's quite innovative, and they're sort of still testing that model. I know more broadly, I mean, with London CLT, they're also looking at kind of passive house and building that's kind of circular and carbon neutral as well. So I think a lot of CLTs in the UK are trying to incorporate that into their methods of construction, and ongoing energy is like costs as well.
Absolutely. And I think it might be worth pointing out with our kind of US people on the call that timber housing is typically less common here. Would that be correct, Hannah? Have I just put a massive shot in the dark?
Yeah, I mean, since the Grenfell fire, I know that it's a lot stricter, and the fire regulations are a lot stricter. And so timber is also more expensive, or can be more expensive depending on the process. So yeah, it doesn't seem to go to in the same way that it is like in Spain or something like that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Would anyone else like to dive in with some current environmental work that your organizations are doing?
I feel like we're mostly focused on that utility costs here in Minnesota with longer winters occasionally. We're putting in even more attic insulation than we have before, really focused on that. I've also been partnering or trying to partner with the local utility company to see if we can get some things going on solar for each one of our homes. Minnesota had passed some legislation for some great incentives for low income buyers for solar. So I'm hoping, despite our federal government unlikelihood to continue those programs, that Minnesota as a state will be able to do so to get our homeowners that program to lower utility costs. I've also there's made a transition to hybrid electric water heaters and looking at costs of around $400 per year for the normal gas water heater, down to about 100 per year for the hybrid or electric, and that's been pretty successful, and that was a pretty recent change. So looking forward to those lower utility costs for our homeowners going forward.
Absolutely. Um, Dali, would you like to speak about any current climate change programs?
Sure, yeah, with pleasure. I think on our side, we are both trying to look at ways to basically use more sustainable construction techniques like circular methods or bio-based materials for the conventional CLTs that we do in Brussels. But on the other side, we also try to help low-income households that are not yet in the CLT model, but who are negatively affected by the European regulations on energy efficiency. It's pushing up the utility costs, but also will threaten these households with eviction if they don't renovate in time. And we're trying to basically provide a model where we support their energy renovations, and in turn, we integrate their land into the community land trust. So basically turning existing private homes into community land trusts by providing renovation in exchange. But the challenge is, of course, to have like a long-term financing scheme. Right now, we're just running this project based on a one-time like a pilot funding, but we're trying to integrate that in the European policy scheme.
That's really interesting. It's interesting to hear that that's reaching people who aren't currently on CLT owned land, especially I know in some areas where it's very dense and there's not a lot of land available. It's interesting to hear how that program's working. Amy, would you like to share anything at all?
So over here in Delaware, I do have to say I'm super grateful because we don't have, we're not experiencing a lot of impact. Like obviously, it's not very apparent, like, what we have going on. But what we are doing is we do a lot of rehabilitations. And so we really focus on creating energy efficiency homes and doing a lot of environmental testing just to make sure, the ground and inside the home is I don't know, just that they're safe and healthy for our buyers. And then the organization that manages the CLT actually is building their first passive homes in a downtown redevelopment kind of project that they're working on. And they will be the first in this state. And so we're really hoping that that can kind of bring more attention to that and inspire other affordable housing organizations to do the same thing.
That's really interesting. It sounds like there's quite a kind of mixed bag of whether these changes are kind of community driven or whether they're kind of from at federal level or at governmental level. Are any of you seeing kind of that clash, I guess, between community wants or what kind of government is looking to do? I guess, Dali, you kind of mentioned that with energy standards.
Yeah, I think also for us the challenge, and I would be curious to hear about your experiences, is that usually the funding channels that go to sustainability are very different from the ones that go to affordable housing and social housing, and it's very difficult to find the funding that would join both the sustainability goals and the affordability goals, and we're really struggling to explain them that we do affordable homes, but we want them to be sustainable as well, and we need some extra funding, at least at the beginning, for that. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, on that same piece, I feel I'm proud in Minnesota that that's kind of built into what we do in our funding. A lot of my reporting goes exactly into saying exactly what sustainability pieces we did, and there are required things that we have to do for every rehab. So I know that's not necessarily the case everywhere. So I'm glad that that's, it's interesting to learn what, at the regional conferences and especially these international pieces, what's going on around the world. But even at the regional conferences to learn how much support we're getting in Minnesota versus even other states. So it's good to hear.
Thanks, nods from you, Frank.
We're kind of at the opposite end of the, at least U.S. political spectrum here, because we met with a congressional office this morning and carefully avoided saying climate change or equity. We talk about the effects of these things, right? We're seeing more hurricanes. Gosh, that makes insurance costs higher. It makes it harder for the average Floridians to buy a home. And so even thinking about where we find the resources to do these kinds of things, other than, unfortunately, paid work, doing reports for communities in the aftermath of a hurricane, which is, a less than ideal time to be considering what could be done, would be far preferable to be thinking about mitigation kind of both at a local and at a macro level. But here we are.
Sorry.
I would have just a quick question to Hannah about because you mentioned in Bristol they're doing carbon capture and working really on the emissions aspects. I would be curious whether they link this in some way to the carbon markets or to carbon trading, carbon credits, because we're trying to look into that as well to get some more funding from that side.
I'm not sure about the carbon credits piece. They've developed a particular build style and with the materials and the sourcing that they use, and they've got kind of a report that details everything. So I can put the name of the organization in the chat, and I think they're gonna publish their system is called Multimax. That's the name of like the type of building they do. So yeah, maybe you can look that up.
Very useful.
And I think similarly,
if we'll go around and if you want to just introduce yourself and maybe where you're calling from, the name of your organization or your community land trust, and then maybe where in the world you're calling from as well, that'd be great. Maybe John, if you want to start.
Hi. My first name is John Edward, double first name. I'm the director of the Interborough Community Land Trust. We're located here in New York City, and we're the first citywide land trust here in the metropolitan area.
Lovely. Thanks for joining. And Christine?
Hello there. So I am actually with the California Endowment, which is a local or California-based foundation. And we are supporting a number of community land trusts. And I am calling from Davis, California.
Lovely. Thank you. Ian?
Hey, y'all. I apologize for having my camera off. I've got a bad cold.
No worries.
I'm the building asset and acquisition manager at Community Home Trust in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Thanks for having me and thanks for hosting this.
Oh, just a brief intro there that I am also from North Carolina originally, even though I'm calling from Glasgow. So it's nice to have someone from North Carolina representing.
Yeah, we're glad to be here. That's cool that you're from NC as well.
Yeah, from Charlotte. I miss it. So it's nice to hear the accent again. And finally, whomever is representing the organization from Haiti. Maybe they'll join in. And that's all right. If not, nice to just be involved in the conversation anyways and hear what other people are doing. So thank you all for your introductions, and it's nice to see everyone coming from different places around the world again. But we'll go ahead and start with sort of a first question to sort of tip things off. So I know you sort of gave a little bit of background on where you're calling from and your organization. But we'll start off with, what is your organization or your CLT currently doing to address climate change? And this could be a big initiative, it could be simple day-to-day things. So whatever you want to share, whatever you feel like sharing would be great. I don't know if anyone wants to start necessarily, but
I'll go just to say that unfortunately we're not really doing anything substantial. I'm working on a climate action plan and looking for ways to try to engage our homeowners' concerns and interest levels. So honestly, they can push us and help lead us in this direction.
yeah, sure. And even if you don't think that you're doing anything, maybe if there's anything that might inspire you from what other people might be saying as well, and maybe from this call, something that you might hear, it'd be great to take away those things as well back to your organizations.
Well, speaking for my CLT, we just developed 15 single-family homes that are climate friendly. We're very, very excited about these homes in order to make them affordable to lower income households in New York City, which is a really big issue. The homes, they receive a property tax exemption. The homeowners receive a special 30-year 2% interest rate mortgage. But on top of that, the homes are brand new, and they're built to passive house standards, and they all have solar panels. So one of the ways that the homes will be friendly to the environment and be affordable to the low and moderate income buyers is that they'll probably have a zero cost, basically zero energy costs, zero heating and cooling costs. And we're expecting them to also be able to generate energy that the utility companies will be paying them for. So we're very excited about these homes, and we hope that they become a standard for constructing other single-family homes here in New York City.
Absolutely. And sorry, did you mention, are people currently living there?
They're being completed, and they're going up for sale.
Oh.
And they're going to be available only to low and moderate income homeowners. The homeowners have already been selected and qualified that went through a lottery system here.
Right. Oh, that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And would you be looking to, I don't know, complete some more projects in the future based on how this one goes?
Well, I mean, it's all a matter of funding.
Yes.
If the city, can come up with the funding, it takes a lot of funding, a big stack of funding to build the houses and to make them affordable. That was one of the biggest challenges. A lot of levels of affordability because they're on our CLT, they have to be affordable in perpetuity for
Right.
low and moderate income households.
Right. Oh, very interesting. That's great to hear, and great to hear the work that you're doing there as well.
Yeah.
I can share from the foundation side. So we do have some grantees. One of them is the California Green New Deal Coalition, and their actually long-term priority is green social housing, which includes, of course, CLTs. And then we also do support some indigenous land trusts too, in Northern California, and there's one in the Bay Area. And so they're trying to acquire land or, bring it back they're trying to create land that is going to, steward the original land, like how it was before. And so I think that is also better than just, plopping a piece of property or building on it. So
yeah, absolutely. And John actually asked, I'm not sure if you can see the chat as well, but is that in Oakland?
There is one, and Segurite Land Trust is It's in Oakland, and then we have another one, Wiat Tribe, way up in Humboldt County in California, which their land trust is called the Dishkama Land Trust.
Oh, that's very interesting. Oh, and it's nice to hear it from especially the foundation side as well. So I guess maybe for John, since you're currently working on a project.
John Edward.
Oh, John Edward, my apologies. I'm so
Double
sorry.
first name. Thank
Double
you.
first name. Apologies. Well, since you're currently working on a project that is being delivered, what seems promising to you from this project?
I think that it sets a precedent here for how you can build single family homes, even though that's not the preference of the city, because the city feels that they can maximize their funding by building multifamily built dwellings for the same amount of money. So that's what their preference is for multifamily co-op buildings, so that they were willing to, fund this. Means that they can be persuaded to do more single family homes. So we're excited that we struck a balance between permanent affordability to lower and moderate income households. And that's really a major feat here in one of the most expensive cities in the United States. And at the same time, we built something that's environmentally friendly and sustainable. So that's why we're so proud of this project.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a wealth building opportunity. I'm sorry. And it's also an asset building opportunity, right? Because this is something that's very important for low and moderate income households here, to be able to build generational wealth.
Absolutely. That's something that's very pertinent in Scotland as well right now, because we have a community wealth building bill passing through Parliament at the moment as well. So that's something that we're very keen on getting out and spreading what community land trusts and what community organizations can do in developing these projects.
And getting land out of the hands of greedy private equity firms and investors. I mean, we have what we're calling here an investor invasion, that they walk in with suitcases full of cash essentially, and they can buy up as many properties as they want. And so it's really imperative that CLTs be given as much public land as possible, so that we can counter the investor invasion here, and everyone can have an opportunity, even low income folks, to be homeowners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not sure, Christine or Ian, or if a representative from the organization from Haiti wants to join in. If there's anything that you're necessarily proud of, per se, any sort of things climate change related that are being addressed that you kind of mentioned, and maybe that other organizations are doing, or other representatives as well, that you might be proud of, or maybe you see as empowering other community organizations, or what have you.
Well, this isn't CLT related, but it is climate related. So, some of our grantees actually are developing climate resiliency centers. So it's a place where, I see that John Edward is probably, that you might have this in New York as well. But it's a place, especially with the climate disasters that are happening a lot in California, fires and floods and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's like a place where community can gather, they can get food, they can get electricity and supplies. Yeah.
That's incredible. It's incredible to see things like that happening, especially, natural disasters. You can't prevent them from happening. So it's nice to see that there's ways to overcome this as well.
I was wondering, in other parts of the country or in other parts of the world, are your homeowners facing skyrocketing insurance costs? Because that's becoming more and more of a natural. And I see Christina shaking her head. I've heard that it's in California. It's happening there. It's already here, and it's endangering our ability to build housing that's permanently affordable. But there's also, we have a bill here before our state legislature that attempts to rein in the insurance companies, because what they're doing is, based on this bill, is that they're creating climate change by funding climate change. And then what they're doing is they're penalizing, homeowners and other folks that receive insurance for their mistakes. So it's like a vicious circle. And so there's a law here to rein them in, to put them under greater scrutiny by our state government so that we can see, first of all, to stop them from funding climate change, right? And also to understand how they're reaching the rates that they're charging by census tract, so that we want to make sure that it's if there are these increases are being done fair and equitably, that they're not just being done on the backs of low and moderate income census tracts. But this is an issue that the folks that are funding climate change, those are the insurance companies, are charging us rates for what they're creating. And I see Christine nodding her head, and I like to hear her perspective on that, because I know that you're going through something similar in California.
Yeah, are we almost out of time, I think?
Yes, there was a little note that just popped up. However, I will say, John Edward, that is getting into sort of the next question. So we're going to talk a little bit about barriers and things like that. So perhaps we can start off the next session with that. But it was definitely great to hear what you all had to say. And I think there's just about 25 seconds left. I just didn't want to get stopped in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah, but I will have to say, yeah, California, the insurance companies are pulling out of California. So
I've heard that.
Really yes.
And it's almost impossible to insure CLT
Yes.
properties now here because of this. It is a disaster.
Yes,
it is a natural disaster for real.
Yep. Yep.
Yes. So we can definitely get a little bit more into that during the next session.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our breakout room. Thank you for rejoining us on this call today. Very glad to have all of you here, and sorry again for the hack that we all experienced. It's very stressful, so thank you for rejoining us. My name is Rylan. I'm from the European Community Land Trust Network, and I am facilitating our conversation today. Lena is also joining us, so thanks for being with us, Lena. She presented on the Caño Martin Peña and how it is working as a CLT to address climate change in Antigua and Barbuda. Maybe that is not completely correct, but the point of our conversation today is to talk about what your CLT or your community, depending on the context that you're in, is doing to address climate change or sustainability or climate justice. So we'll just first do a quick round for everyone to introduce themselves. And thank you for going cameras on as well. So I'll just go in the order that you're on my screen. Jerry, would you mind introducing yourself, saying the organization that you're from and where you're calling from today? Oh, you're on mute right now. There you go.
Okay. I'm part of Grassroots Institute's work group. They basically have been working, it's challenging in our community because those who are old enough and free enough to do activism work tend to be very comfortable. So getting people on board for housing and community land trust has been a challenge. We did finally get Housing Mendocino in place, our city of Fort Bragg, California. We're in the Mendocino coast, Northern California. And we were actually able to get the city of Fort Bragg to support a community land trust. They did all of the funding and they got Housing Mendocino in place. The challenge has been the real estate community. Every time people are bidding on the properties, they have hedge funds, global asset groups outbidding everybody all the time. So this is our big challenge right now. And as I said, getting the comfortable community on board. We have huge income inequality in our community. I would say half of our county lives on 20 to 30,000 a year, which is way below the poverty line. And then we have a huge, because we're too beautiful, we have huge estates and properties and this sort of thing. So, it's a big challenge. And it usually isn't until we have climate emergencies that people get their head out of the sand. So it's an uphill battle, and because of the huge amount of wealth and real estate power here, we're really having to work harder to get community engagement.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thanks for introducing yourself and already sharing a little bit about the context that you're coming from, Jerry. Next, I'll go to Maureen, if you don't mind introducing yourself, where you're from, and the organization.
Yeah, hi. I'm Maureen Donahue, and I'm a professor and a researcher from Rutgers University in New Jersey. And I think I'm interested in community land trusts in Rio de Janeiro. I've done some work with them. And then also, I've started looking at the Caño Martin Peña, so I was interested to hear about that. In terms of what my area experiences in the Mid-Atlantic here, hurricanes are definitely an issue, extreme heat, and rising energy costs for sure. And so I think a lot of people are switching to solar. But I mean, we're all just petrified right now about like what's going to happen with this administration and, especially I actually live in the DC area. So worried about what's going to happen with any kind of energy programs. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. Yeah, thanks both for sharing challenges. I think probably most people can relate to these like paralysis that you're feeling and going up against a large real estate community. It's really challenging. So thanks. Ricardo, do you mind presenting yourself next?
Hi, I'm Ricardo Daza. I'm from Colombia. I'm doing my PhD in Reading in the UK. And it's about community land trust stewardship and how can we improve the stewardship mechanisms and especially oriented towards learning from indigenous communities stewardship in land to bring it back to the CLT and improve the CLT stewardship mechanism. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Jasper, you're calling from Amsterdam, so do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, I am. Hello, I'm Jasper. I'm from Amsterdam. Live in Amsterdam, work in Amsterdam, my own company in the building environment and climate goals. I can talk hours about it. I will save you that. I'm a little bit struggling with the sunshine. Outside it's shining the whole day outside, but now it's also hitting my screen. But I'm okay. And yeah, the geopolitical situation now, we have also on the far right cabinet here in the Netherlands, but yeah, I'm not gonna be frustrated. We need to keep the eyes on the ball. I mentioned it last week. The big questions are there. The big goals are there. Banking, insurance companies, everybody is aware of it, dealing with it, acting on it. And that's hopeful. The European Commission is acting on it. Yes, we have big egos and big screaming, but if you keep the eyes on the ball and don't make yourself crazy. And it makes me a happy man.
Great, thank you for introducing yourself. And Stephen, could you introduce yourself as well? We're just saying our names, where we're from, or where we're calling from in our organization.
Okay, so I'm Stephen Hill. I'm from the UK. I've been very involved in the growth of the CLT movement there. I'm actually in Toronto at this very minute. And I've been visiting community land trusts and other community land ownership organizations in New York and upstate New York over the last fortnight. And one of the things that I'm looking at is not only how do community organizations own land in the situations where climate change adaptation has to be managed, but also what is the role of community organizations in initiating the conversations in places about the changes that are needed. And it's just a kind of reflection of what's going on in the UK at the moment, where it's a kind of very oppositional binary kind of conversation. It's either one thing or the other, and whoever's saying, I want this thing, everybody hates the other thing. And so it's kind of very difficult to have kind of rational conversations. But there do seem to be institutions working in the US that kind of are managing this a bit, certainly better than the UK.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And Lena, would you like to introduce yourself again, or?
No, I think I already spoke enough, but just also saying that I'm also calling from Brussels. I'm at the Cosmopolis Center for Urban Research, and I work very closely with the Caño Martín Peña Community Land Trust. I'm also on the board of the International Center for Community Land Trusts.
Thank you, Lena. So thanks everyone for introducing yourself. I think it's very interesting. So our lead question here, I'll just put it in the chat as well, is what is your organization doing, large or small, to address climate change, sustainability, or climate justice? Does anyone have, I think you've started to talk about this a little bit. I was wondering if anyone has a tangible example that they would like to share from their community, or it might also be interesting, this conversation about how we facilitate conversations, even if it's not a tangible sort of hands-on approach to climate change. How are we starting to drive a conversation that is a little bit different? Any thoughts on this? I see some nodding from Jasper, if you want to come in. And Stephen is unmuted, so Stephen, you want to start? Or?
Yes, here I am.
Oh, Jasper, great.
Yeah, I'm calling it a fight against ourselves. On the one hand, we have the goals, and on the other hand, we have the practice. And how to translate this in a message that people can't refuse, even the far right, but also the left. And yeah, then ownership plays a crucial role in this. But yeah, we have a whole system created as a society here in the Netherlands. I can speak that it's all based on ownership. We buy things, we own it, and we throw it away. So yeah, renting stuff. There are some initiatives here, but it's slowly and small. And that's why that triggers me the whole this kind of big questions, circularity, climate, the big questions. Yeah, ownership can play a role. And that's what the community land trust community and ownership combination is fascinating. But also the legal part of it, how you can execute it, how you can realize it, make it a new standard instead of buying and owning stuff. It's quite interesting, but also quite complex. And I love complex questions. So yeah, but it's a struggle for me.
Yeah, thank you. I think especially just very quick response. I work for the European CLT network, and it's always interesting legally, how do you translate the CLT approach into different legal contexts? And it is a complex question that in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam in particular, people are still working on. So if you're interested in being part of it, happy to connect you to people. But Stephen, you also unmuted. Did you have thoughts on what your organization is doing?
Yeah, well, I think it's more. Since I don't have an organization, I'm a kind of a free roving person. But I was just kind of making an observation about one of the things that I've seen, which was in the Rockaways on Long Island in New York. So this is a community that's extremely vulnerable to sea level rises and was very exposed during some of the recent hurricanes, as a result of which the city has had to make some significant changes. They've had to reinforce the railway that kind of links Rockaways to the rest of the city. It's in a very vulnerable position. But I think what really kind of struck me was that there was, it was a kind of place that was, I think, very was not rich in kind of community organizing or civic institutions. One particular one called Rockaways Institute for Sustainability and Equity has been around for some time. It's been a really important anchor for some of these things, and managed to get some money from kind of Land Conservancy Trust, I think. Not quite sure of the names of all these things, but some time ago, which initiated community conversations about a significant range of things that needed to happen, both in securing the the kind of the dunes and the kind of sandbank that they're basically built on, but also to try and revive new house building activity that was genuinely affordable. Uh, and I think it was at a time when the New York Community Land Initiative was getting some kind of political mileage with the city. And so a kind of community land trust was established, but immediately it was kind of put into a really kind of difficult job. I think my observation as an outsider was it needed much more support and help in order to kind of get going and to take on that role. And I spoke with a couple of people who are involved with it, and they feel that they've been really kind of struggling. So I think that it's really important to make sure that these community land trusts get the right support, technical support, particularly, and financial support when they assume these really important, responsible roles.
Yeah, I think, thanks very much, Stephen. I saw a message, I don't know if you saw it as well, that we have 1 minute left, maybe 45 seconds ago. So we're going to get called back to the main room. But our next topic is about support to CLTs and the obstacles that they're facing and how we can go about sort of working together and what tools we can provide. So it's a perfect segue. Thank you. Not planted comment, but thank you very much. So yeah, I think now I've sort of given a wrap up and we aren't being called back to the main room, but and feel free to reflect a little bit more on examples that you would like to share, because we'll come back together in about 10 minutes. And if you have thoughts in the meantime, you're welcome to unmute, but you may get cut off.
I'm gonna call on Lena actually to help us here, and to give just a formal review to everyone. What did we all learn?
Yes, exactly. What have we all learned? I'm going to call each of the facilitators to just give us a very short sort of summary of what they've learned. So Geert, would you mind going first? If he's here already.
Oh, I don't think here's
No, maybe
no.
Rylan, I'll ask you because I know you're back.
Sure. I'll try to do a quick summary of the interesting conversation we had. I think something that was very interesting that was sort of a common thread was CLTs providing an alternative to binaries that we're seeing, political binaries, and also like ownership versus rental, and yeah, sort of providing a new way that we can be thinking about the crisis that we're addressing and maybe start conversations and conceptualizing sort of how we can address the climate crisis in a new way collectively. So quick summary of the conversation.
That was a great summary. Thank you, Rylan. Josie?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation. It was quite a mixed room. We had a lot of kind of people involved in climate. So there was a bit of chat about kind of utilities, switching to electric from gas, switching to solar as a energy generation method. But then also we were joined by Frank, who was representing Florida, who was talking about kind of more hurricane response, and that kind of led to a bit of chat around community-driven solutions and coming against different kind of I can't think of the word, like silos, being put into silos by kind of funding for housing versus funding for sustainability, and that not necessarily always matching up at a governmental level. So yeah, we covered quite a few different areas.
Sorry about that. I was just also texting with Ben to just see if Geert was back. But Geert, I think you're back here. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a very short sort of summary of what was discussed in your group.
Well, I'm sorry, I just came back. I was not in any group. I thought I didn't know that it was on again.
No
I'm
problem
sorry.
at all. No problem, Geert. Yeah, indeed, we're back on, but yeah. Sorry,
we had Josie and Morgan and Rylan and Annabelle.
Annabelle, would you mind sharing
Yes, of course, thanks. And many thanks to my group for sharing despite tech's best efforts. We did arrive abruptly, so apologies for the cutoff. But we had a very good conversation, understanding that some of the motivations for this work comes through the structure for building. So, the way that we build homes, how is that actually adding to climate change, the importance of mitigation. The points were made, the location of where to build, how that can respond to climate. And second was about the people as well. So the kind of dual approach. So being motivated by the polarization and disconnection that has emerged through climate change discourse. And the groups also mentioned that some motivations include to how to honor Indigenous land management in this work. As well as considerations for mobility justice. So in other cases, how to use community land trust movement for advocacy for clean and accessible transport and the implications that has for air quality, pollution, justice, and climates, and the really important role of CLTs in building networks with partners for this sort of education and awareness. So thanks again, and see you all in breakout session 2.
That's amazing, Annabelle. I'm really impressed with these summaries. You've covered a lot of ground in just a very short time. So Morgan, would you like to say something?
Yes, of course. And thank you to my group as well. We had a very diverse group from all different backgrounds, those working with CLTs directly who have worked on or are currently delivering big projects, passive house projects, which is great to hear. And also those supporting from the foundation side as well, talking about grantees. We also touched on, just as Annabelle mentioned, we also touched on the foundation supporting Indigenous land trust and getting land back to them, which is great to hear as well. Touch a little bit on community wealth building, which I will add in as well, being from Scotland, that's important to us right now. And also just started to get into a few sort of barriers as far as insurance companies go and providing for community land trusts. So we'll see what happens in breakout session 2.
Great. I think that wraps up then the report backs here for session number 1. So for now, let's dive into session number 2, where you all are going to talk about the challenges that your organization is facing.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for that end. We get a quick 1-minute warning, so I'll be sure to read it out loud next time. But welcome back. And our question for this one, as Ben suggested there, is we want to hear about the challenges your organization or networks are facing. So really what's getting in the way of achieving this climate justice work? And is there anything that would help, or what sorts of support tools or partnerships would help move that forward? And hello to Garrett, who's joining our group this time. Do you want to say a quick hi to everyone, Garrett?
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm Geert. I was supposed to play the role of Annabelle too, but yeah. Nice to be here. So I work in Community Land Trust Brussels in Belgium, and well, very quickly, we are working on topics related to climate change, especially when it comes to building climate neutral buildings. We all our buildings are passive house buildings. We are also, I heard you mentioned traffic and mobility, Annabelle. This is also something we are very much involved in. We organize bicycle trainings within our community, and we have a project on shared electric vehicles. Well, yeah,
Yes, thanks, Garrett. It's hard to sum up everything going on at CLTV in a quick intro, I know. So that might be one for people to connect in afterwards with you. Ivana was with South LA, who mentioned the mobility justice. So that might be a point of interest.
Yes.
For future. Yeah, great. Okay, so we've got another, I don't know, 12 or 13 minutes left probably here to chat through that second question. And for the others who've done introductions, maybe if you're, when responding, if you want to say a quick hello or recap for Gert's benefit in this conversation, that would be appreciated as well. But Rob, we didn't get to you last time, so my apologies. Wonder if you want to maybe chime in first here with any response or questions for the group for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really answer the question. My organization doesn't have challenges because I'm just me. That's a challenge, I guess. I'm just trying to think of what to summarize of what I do. As I said, I've worked on recovery after big disasters in a lot of different places for a long time. And as an urban planner, I've always been particularly interested in the situations where somebody proposes that after the disaster that the community shouldn't be rebuilt in the same place. And there's an obvious logic to that, and sometimes that comes from an outside voice. Sometimes it comes from the community itself. Sometimes it is, in fact, physically impossible to build back in the same place. And I'm interested in sort of how that process works, and under what situations it makes sense to move, and under what situations it doesn't, and how that decision process plays out. And I've looked at a lot of different examples in a lot of different settings, and it's and I've learned a lot about those things. But it's been, again, I've been doing this for years, and in more recent years, we have the topic of a coastal retreat, a term that people just sort of throw around loosely, not really appreciating all the complexities and meanings that really hide in that. And so I've been sort of, with one hand, I'm still working on a lot of these various cases in a lot of different places, and with the other hand, I'm thinking about how we can take some of those lessons and look forward to how to deal with sea level rise. And one of the really key things is that it's a lot easier to do this if we can think a lot more flexibly about property. And it's not like we're trying to take property away from anybody. There's just different ways of conceptualizing property rights that aren't tied to little rectangles on the ground. And that has some collectivity to it. And to be honest, our current system has collectivity to it as well, because if we didn't all agree to be locked in little boxes of rectangles on the ground, then it wouldn't be so. So it's just a different way of thinking, a more suitable way of thinking collectively about property, which I think can make it easier to adapt. So I don't want to take up all the time, but we're trying to apply some of that thinking to some issues here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is currently just recently been mandated by the state to do sea level rise adaptation plans over the next 10 years, every single jurisdiction around the Bay. And I know they're all going to look the same. There's going to be interesting things, but we're trying to encourage them to be, as one of the ways they're thinking about doing things, of thinking much more flexibly about property, and recognizing, as I think Line pointed out, recognizing that actually the property system that we think we have is in reality isn't even quite that as well. There are actually lots of different collective examples right in front of our eyes that we ignore. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, no, that's a good intro to kind of get now from our practitioners and the CLT reps of exactly how you're managing that experience. So the questions I heard there are about this rebuild process, so how to navigate that, or the different opinions of where and how, if that's something you're experiencing. Or second is how we are dealing with what are the challenges in getting people to think differently about property, about housing. So I'll open it up to the others.
Well, what helps us from other folks working on this issue is successful case studies that we can point to get our political leaders to understand that it's possible and fuel their imaginations. Politicians want to make their mark and be first, but they don't want to actually do it before somebody else has proven that it's viable. And so international examples are a good way of getting the ballots there. Data is, so helpful that we can, make telling our stories. So stories that are compelling that have been told about work that has been done. It all helps so much in terms of keeping our communities motivated, helping create our vision and our story, and placing ourselves in this global movement is really valuable, and connecting and being able to bring in experts from other places to speak to our decision makers who can have the outside expertise and help us influence folks and help us bring people on board is fantastic also. So those are a few things that I find really helpful. And just knowing you're not alone.
Yeah, thanks. Some good suggestions, good asks there to bring back.
Yeah, examples on financing are really helpful too, because that's a big nut. Building cheaply up front or doing things quick and dirty cheap, and when we're talking about resources that we want to last 100 years is foolish, and yet that is the system that we have. So showing the financing, housing should not have an ROI. It's shelter. It's a human right. But nevertheless, like being able to tell that story to people who man the purses. And of course, we now have in Canada, our new Prime Minister was the chair of the Bank of England as well, or the Bank of England in Canada at various times. So he knows all about money, but we need to have to help him understand why he needs to let it fly loose or in the right places.
I think that's an excellent point that one of the able to think differently or be imaginative, you do have to be able to make a compelling financial case to kind of get people on board while offering alternative. Okay, thank you. Gert or Ivana, would you like to react to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Also to the point of Rob about new ownership structures, etc. I really think that there is some kind of an opportunity in as for instance rebuild programs, but also the renovation programs. There will be in many cases a lot of public investments that are needed, and in a way this is also could be an opportunity to incentivize these new property forms. For instance, we are working on a project where we reach out to poor homeowners who don't have the means to renovate their homes, but they will be forced to renovate them because there are new norms coming up, and if they don't manage to do the refurbishment and the energy measures, they will receive fines, etc. And so we want to reach out to them, help them with an important financial support, and also coaching them to do the right renovations, the right investments. But in exchange, they bring the land under the home into the community land trust, which really increases a lot the impact of the government investment. It goes well beyond just a climate measure. It creates affordable housing effect. And something similar, I think we had a few years ago, we had also big floodings here in Belgium. And they're still talking about how to rebuild these communities. In this case, I think this could also be an interesting way of using the public investment that is needed for these rebuilding programs to make also affordable housing But then there's also the question. I do agree with you that it's important to consider that there are other ownership structures possible, but it's also a bit of I don't say, for me it's not a moral question, but it could be considered like taking advantage of people in a very fragile situation to force them into what's considered a lower ownership situation. And I think that's something really we have to think about how we can tell this story, that it's not second best, but that it is what could be the advantages, what's the reason behind community land trust. And I think in a way there are some opportunities to use that word. Yeah.
Thank you, Kurt. Yeah. And we've got 2 minutes left. So I want to just make sure, Ivana, you have the chance to weigh in if you'd like to.
Yeah, I just really appreciate the conversations and the questions that were asked. I'll admit I'm not an expert. I feel like I'm fairly new to the CLT world. And I do have a question for Gert about that program, about how you are, I guess, incentivizing homeowners who can't afford, renovating their homes to meet the criteria or the requirements of where they live. I was wondering how is that being like funded? Is it like how do you get the funding to help support those who can't meet that criteria?
Yeah, well, that's the basic question, of course. Today we have funding to do a small number of pilot projects that we want to use to reach out to the European institutions who are designing climate funds, and that our program could be also part of the measures within this social climate fund in Brussels, as well as in other cities where other community land trusts are experimenting with similar models. So it's both trying it on the ground, and we are also involved in advocacy to make it EU funded program.
Hi again, everyone. I hope I did our conversation justice on my feedback. So I guess we've kind of started a little bit talking about some of the challenges, talked around funding, around kind of different views at different political levels. Are there any other areas that people are thinking about? It could be about capacity or kind of technical knowledge or abilities at all.
Was that the challenges that CLTs that are facing with climate? Yeah. I mean, I think what Dali said earlier around viability tends to be a big one. And I think most CLTs struggle with funding issues and the balance of affordability and quality. And obviously kind of getting registered for passive house is quite expensive. Yeah, so I think in the UK at the moment, we're still in a position where we're fighting to make the case for CLTs and why they're important, and government funding has kind of dried up and stopped. And I know that the national network's kind of doing quite a lot of lobbying to try and rejuvenate some of that. So when a sector is just struggling to survive, it's quite difficult to also be forward thinking.
Yeah, I hear you on that. How what's the kind of funding landscape like where other people are based? Is that kind of a main challenge?
100,000%. I feel like so much of our work, it gets harder and harder to just address the immediate housing challenges, and kind of having the time and the brain space, the staff and the funding to address climate change is pretty daunting, if I'm being honest. I mean, we struggle enough getting the funding together to just build a relatively simple home and get people into it, and trying to do additional steps that we think would have a lot of merit. We have occasionally managed to do, put solar on the roof, or, more energy efficient appliances or air conditioning, but that tends to come from special grant resources, not from our regular funding sources, which are already scarce enough to start with. Like, boy, we'd love to be doing more, and how?
Everything we do currently is all what we call acquisition rehab, so we're not doing any new builds at this point. So I think some of our challenges are also related to funding, but in what homes we can pursue. So there's some communities in our area that have housing stock from the early 1900s or even the late 1800s, and that's not really something we can pursue at this point because of the needed changes that would go into that would then put us over our funding capabilities, and thus the price point would be too high to be able to sell affordably. So we've kind of limited our housing stock availability as well as our community availability. We aren't able to look so much into certain communities because of the age of the developments there. There's not as much we can do, and I think that would be an even better approach for us to be able to do something for those homes and those communities, but it's just not something that we're able to do at this point. So.
Just in our side, we're trying to look in any possible direction. We're trying to cut the costs by doing, for example, self-renovation with the residents, by reusing material or reusing furniture and things like that. But we see that there is also a limit of what we can ask from residents who already come from a difficult background. So we cannot push too much on them either, just to reduce the costs. And on the other side, yeah, we're trying to link up with some energy community projects in Brussels who are really interested in our model. So there is like a good possibility for cooperation, and there seems to be funding on that side. And as I mentioned, we're trying also to basically to use the reduction of emissions that we achieve with energy renovations to emit some carbon credits. I mean, this is just a model that we're looking into now. We haven't started yet, but trying to diversify a bit our funding resources. Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's interesting to hear that, that those partnerships and cooperation is kind of, building that capacity and that funding ability. That's great to hear. I mean, I guess it's kind of one of the questions that we can go to from today is like, are there kind of support tools, partnerships that the centre or the other networks can look into that will help you kind of move forward through these challenges? Anyone in the call?
I think the European CLT network is sort of thinking about, as we're getting set up, what we can offer more broadly. And I suppose something that networks generally offers, of course, kind of shared messaging and case studies, and then the fruits of whatever kind of lobbying or fundraising. So I think with networks, it's normally about access and sharing information and ease of information.
Mm.
We see there is like a great need, I think, for evidence, for studies, kind of proving the case for applying sustainable construction methods or renovation methods to CLTs, like really proving the case that, you know, if there is public investment for such types of sustainable solutions, they should focus the investments on CLTs, because here we really have a long-term perspective and the impact will be like higher, also socially and environmentally. And we find that we struggle a bit to have the figures and facts to, you know, to support this, even if we know intuitively this is the case. That would be helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. Case studies can be really valuable in that way of kind of setting precedents, I think. Would anyone else in the room like to speak to that? Amy, Zach, or Frank?
I can say that we have in Delaware we have similar problems, or for Diamond State anyway, that Zach was mentioning, in that the areas that we are doing our acquisition with some of the grants that we have, they're rural, and so many of these homes are very old. They need a lot of work, and our state in particular is really resistant to funding any acquisition and rehab projects. And we have a lot of funding that's available for homeownership repair programs. And what we're trying to do right now is kind of see if we can get some of that funding to come in on the front end. So, you know, we'll be selling these homes to low income buyers, and you know, just to kind of get in on the front end of it. But yeah, I think our main issue right now is that our state just does not support shared equity housing, and so funding is a major issue for us.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to that, in Florida, we have fairly good access to both federal and state dollars, but they come through our cities and counties, and we don't receive any direct operating support from any of the cities or counties where we work. So our budget is almost all what we would describe as earned income on real estate development. And when we're selling a home, our homes, and so our financial pro formas on these homes, are competing with other nonprofit NGO organizations that sell homes fee simple with you know, maybe a 10-year affordability contract attached. And we're starting to see more cities and counties understand, oh, this is a lot of money to put into subsidy to allow to expire in a relatively short number of years. But that still doesn't affect the way that our projects are funded. I hope that maybe that's shifting a bit as the subsidies get deeper, but it still becomes a point that makes the CLT work an even more challenging effort. And our work has been probably 80 or 85% new construction. We've done a lot less acquisition and rehab, though we're starting to see a point in the real estate cycle where housing prices are not just so insane relative to construction costs that we may be able to acquire and rehab some and bring them into the trust that way. So
Interesting. I guess we've focused quite a bit on the funding side of things. Are there other areas at all that people are kind of coming up against as challenges? It's always funding. It's
Well,
always number one.
I mean, it's always the funding, certainly, but not being allowed to say equity and talking about, historically disinvested communities or marginalized communities definitely makes the work a little harder these days here in the US and here in Florida.
Yeah, I wish I had a solution to that one. Zach, did you have something to add?
I think the only thing it's just been on my mind, it seems like is it Dolly? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Thanks. Just it's your program seems so different than anything that we have going on that I've heard of. So if we have any ability to, if others are interested, or if I should connect separately, but I'm curious more about your program, and you're mentioning things like furniture and working with current homeowners, and that just sounds so unique. So wondering if you could share any more in the limited time that we have, or in the next session, if others are open to that.
Dali, sorry.
Well, yeah, maybe yes, if I send you by email, I think a few info about the project with
You're
pleasure.
in Brussels, right?
In Brussels, yeah. With
Yeah, I
Gert.
visited Calico a few weeks ago with the European CLT network, and that was
Okay.
really cool to see. The project Calico in Brussels has end of life care and birthing suites, and I mean that's not directly obviously related to climate, although they do have a kind of reclaimed garden like marshland at the back. So it's just a really interesting project, community solidarity project.
Maybe one thing to that, and it could lead to another topic, is the basically the different services that are provided within the communities, and that you have some shared energy that we mentioned, but we also are experimenting with shared mobility. Because due to the strict European regulations, you have to have some parking lots with each building. But in our case, like most of the parking lots are unused by the residents because they simply don't have cars. That's not the kind of people or audience. But we're trying to use these empty parking lots to have shared bicycles and even like shared electric cars, for example.
So coming back into, I guess, the discussion that we sort of left off in, but we're kind of looking at challenges and barriers that your organizations or CLTs are facing at the moment. And then we'll kind of wrap it up and end, hopefully, before we get that notification of 1 minute left. We'll end it thinking a little bit more positively on how we